A couple of years ago, Kevin Holland was the hottest property in the UFC. He was a rising star with the world ahead of him. So why does Chael Sonnen think that he's on the brink of being thrown out of the UFC if he doesn't perform? And why did Holland backtrack on his retirement announcement to face Thompson? Stay tuned for all that plus more MMA news coming right up. First up, the champion calls Kevin Holland's fight. Plenty of people tuned in to UFC 279 to watch two people go to war. The first was fan favorite Nate Diaz, who was fighting in his last event on his contract, and the second was Khamzat Chimaev, whose rapid rise has many people pointing to him as the future champion of the middleweight division. After months of build-up though, the event was deflated when Khamzat Chimaev missed the weight limit by a whopping 7.5 pounds. It was out of the question for him to face Diaz, who was on weight at 171 pounds. So the UFC had to think fast. They substituted another legend, Tony Ferguson, to face Diaz, while Kevin Holland would be fighting Chimaev at 180-pound catchweight. Although disappointed, most fans were satisfied with the solution. For Nate, who was the heavy underdog against Chimaev, it was a dream send-off. He duked it out with Ferguson until landing a beautiful guillotine submission to finish his UFC career in style. Meanwhile, Chimaev was even more dominant, finishing Kevin Holland in less than 3 minutes. One of those watching on was middleweight champion Israel Adesanya, who awaits Khamzat if he can continue his form. Reacting to the performance, Adesanya called the fight crazy and gave a shout out to Holland for putting up a good fight anyway. But while Chimaev may have earned Adesanya's respect in the octagon, he called him a for missing weight by such a big margin. So is Holland really retiring? Only a fighter can know when the time is right to hang up the gloves. Everything else is just advice. When Daniel Cormier heard that Luke Rockhold was thinking of returning to the octagon, he told his friend to stay home. And it looks like someone may have given similar advice to Kevin Holland. His latest loss to Khamzat Chimaev at UFC 271 was enough to make up his mind. Holland revealed that he is now officially retired after a good run in the industry. He admitted that times are tough, but also felt that he had made a good payday throughout his 7-year professional MMA career. And he even had some kind words for Chimaev, who helped secure his financial future. Holland even joked that he's thinking of getting a poster of Chimaev to hang up in his house. That's why Holland had no regrets about calling it quits. On an episode of the Realized Recognized podcast, he said that the only thing that would lure him out of retirement would be a super duper magical opportunity. It's unclear what exactly he means by this, but fans were sure that this was the end for Holland, especially because he assured everyone that it wasn't a power play or gimmick. But as he was announcing his retirement, Holland ignited the flames of some online beef. According to Holland, former fighter and media personality Brendan Schaub had been saying some weird stuff about him after his loss to Chimaev, and Holland suggested that the two do some boxing rounds to settle the score. Careful which fighters you call out, Brendan. You might be getting more than you bargained for. Next up, Bisping doesn't buy it. A man with his finger on the pulse of the MMA world is Michael Bisping. The loudmouth Englishman never holds anything back and knows what it takes to get to the top. But the former middleweight champion also knows how addictive the fight game is, and that talk is cheap when fighters are talking about their future. On his podcast, Bisping reacted to Holland's retirement announcement, and he didn't mince his words. He called it while commending Holland as a great fighter who is still in the prime of his life. Bisping thinks that there's no chance that Holland would actually walk away from his huge income stream, especially because he loves shiny things. Bisping went on to point out that many great fighters use this tactic to negotiate better contracts for themselves and to keep the fans entertained. He said that Jon Jones, Nate Diaz, and Conor McGregor are all famous for announcing their retirement before jumping straight back into MMA a couple of months later. And that's what Dana White's theory is. The president described Holland's announcement as an emotional reaction to such a big loss. The global MMA spotlight was on Holland and he didn't perform. But on the bright side, the pressure wasn't on him as much as Chimaev, who was already expected to wipe the floor with Diaz. If Holland does continue, this could be a small chink in his armor. And if Charles Oliveira has taught us anything, it's that it's never too late for a UFC career comeback. Up next, how did the UFC break the news that Kevin Holland is not retiring? And why does Chael Sonnen think that his UFC career is coming to an end anyway? So don't go anywhere. Up next, Holland's not leaving. MMA fans have a reason to smile again. It looks like Kevin Holland isn't going anywhere, at least for now. Holland joined the UFC through Dana White's Contender Series before making a big impression. In 2020, he fought and won a record 5 times, blitzing through middleweight fighters like Joaquin Buckley and Ronaldo Souza with deadly knockouts. Unfortunately, he hasn't been able to keep up that form. Consecutive losses to Derek Brunson and Marvin Vettori slowed down his momentum, but he slowly looked to be getting back on track. That was until running into the rising superstar Khamzat Chimaev. Holland stepped in at last minute after Chimaev missed weight for his hotly anticipated fight against Nate Diaz. Chimaev was the heavy favorite against outgoing legend Diaz, and he showed why with his first-round finish of Kevin Holland. Since then, it was reported that Holland would be retiring from the sport, which the 29-year-old backed up by announcing his official retirement on his own podcast. But things changed quickly at the UFC, and just as quickly as Holland pulled out of the sport, he has been pulled back in. This time, it was the UFC making the announcement, when they revealed that Holland was confirmed to face Stephen Wonderboy Thompson in Orlando this December. This will be one of Holland's biggest challenges yet. Chimaev was a tough ask for any fighter, but Thompson is a former title contender. He drew with Woodley for the welterweight championship before losing the rematch, so he has a lot of experience on the big stage. Next up, Chael Sonnen calls BS. The UFC is a cutthroat organization. If you don't perform, then you won't get a contract. It's as simple as that. And after Holland's heavy loss to Chimaev, some are wondering whether or not he is on his way out. According to Chael Sonnen, Holland's fate will be decided by the result of his next fight. Even though Kevin Holland is not even in the top 15 of the UFC's middleweight rankings, nobody denies that he has potential. His 23-8 record is something he earned through blood, sweat, and tears. He has built up 10 wins in the UFC over the past 4 years, which is 10 times as many as Conor McGregor, but Holland just doesn't attract enough fans to guarantee himself a place in the organization. That's why Chael Sonnen thinks that his career depends on his result against Wonderboy. Sonnen described Wonderboy as the single worst fight Kevin Holland could have taken. Sonnen's reasoning is that Holland has been open about how he matches up badly against wrestlers. Stephen Wonderboy Thompson is known as a striker, with almost half of his MMA wins via knockout and only one with a submission. So if Holland can't get the job done against Thompson, there's not much left that he can sell himself with. If he's not a wrestler or a striker, what is he? Despite that, UFC President Dana White has been supportive of Holland, telling the media that he hopes to keep Holland in the organization. So we might take Dana White's word on this one instead, okay, Chael? Next, Dana White sweetens the deal. Michael Bisping is right. Kevin Holland does like shiny things, but he loves them even more when they're from people he trusts. That's why Dana White's surprise gift almost brought him to tears. Dana White has made no secret of how good a relationship he shares with Kevin Holland, and he definitely doesn't say that about all his fighters. Even when Tyron Woodley was champion, Dana couldn't wait to get rid of him because his fights were boring. He feels almost the total opposite about Kevin Holland, and he proved it by gifting a pair of Nike sneakers to Kevin Holland. Now, a pair of sneakers may not sound like much for a fighter with millions of dollars, but it really is the thought that counts. Posting a video when he received the shoes, Holland revealed that it might make him cry. Now, this is the side of the UFC that we want to see more of. Do you think it's time for Kevin Holland to call it quits? And how do you think he'll fare against Stephen Thompson? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again in the next one.